All right, let's talk about the book of Leviticus. For a lot of us, this is the place where our read the whole Bible in a year plans go to quietly fade away. It just seems so weird and dense and maybe a little irrelevant. But what if I told you it's actually one of the most important, most beautiful books for understanding the entire story of the Bible? I mean, is it really just a dusty old list of bizarre rules about skin diseases and sacrifices? Or could it be something totally different? What if it's a guidebook designed to answer one of the biggest questions in the whole story of God and humanity? That's what we're going to dig into. So to get Leviticus, you've got to know the backstory. At the end of the previous book, Exodus, something amazing happens. God's glorious, fiery presence comes down from heaven to live right in the middle of the Israelites, in this special tent called the tabernacle. It's this incredible, holy moment, but it also creates a huge, huge problem. And there it is. That's the one question that the entire book of Leviticus is built to answer. Think about it. God, who is pure, perfect, and the source of all life, has just moved into the neighborhood with a bunch of flawed, messy, and very mortal people. How in the world does that work? How can they live together without God's intense holiness basically destroying them? Leviticus is the answer. Okay, so this brings us to our first big idea. Leviticus isn't about a bunch of random rules from a distant God. It's about how to do life with a God who has chosen to live right next door. Let's completely reframe this. This book is not a legal textbook designed to trip people up. It's a survival guide. It's a user manual for living in close proximity to the raw power and pure goodness of the Creator. It's a blueprint for relationship. And this right here, this is the heartbeat of the whole book. God isn't just barking orders. He's inviting his people to become like him, to reflect his own good character. To be holy just means to be set apart, to be different from the nations around them, because they are connected to this unique, life-giving God. Now, this is one of those ideas that once you get it, unlocks the whole book. Leviticus makes this really important distinction between sin and uncleanness. Sin is a moral failure, stealing, lying. It's breaking a direct command. But uncleanness is different. It's a temporary ritual state. For example, touching a dead body made you unclean. It wasn't a sin, but it meant you would come into contact with death, which is the opposite of God, who is life. So you just had to go through a purification process before you could enter God's sacred space again. It wasn't about being bad, it was about respecting the difference between life and death. So how did the Israelites learn all this? I mean, how do you make an abstract idea like holiness feel real? Well, God gave them a tangible visual system, a kind of divine blueprint. And the main teaching tool was the tabernacle itself. It was basically designed as a physical map of God's presence. It was a model that showed everyone that getting close to the holy God was possible, but it was a process that required preparation and respect. And you can see it so clearly here. You had these, concentric circles of holiness. The outer court, that was for all the Israelites. You could come in, make your offerings, but to get closer into the holy place, you had to be a priest. And to get to the very center, the bullseye, the most holy place where God's presence was concentrated, well, only the high priest could go in there, and only one day a year after a whole lot of purification. It was this powerful, constant visual lesson. Approaching God is a serious, wonderful thing that you do with intention. So, if we keep this idea of relationship in mind, all those laws start to look really different. They stop feeling like restrictions and start to sound a lot more like a language of love. I mean, what if God wasn't just giving a list of do's and don'ts, but was actually saying, hey, if we're going to be close, if we're going to have this healthy relationship, here are the things that look like me, that are consistent with my character, and here are the things that just aren't. This is so key. Think about a healthy marriage. The vows and the boundaries in that relationship don't exist to kill the romance. They exist to create a safe space where trust and intimacy can actually grow. The rules in Leviticus work the same way for Israel's special relationship with God. They were the agreed-upon terms that protected the closeness they shared. And just so we don't think this was all about temple rituals, Leviticus makes it crystal clear that being holy had everything to do with social justice. Being set apart for God meant creating a society that looked like God, a society that was just and compassionate. It meant caring for the poor, dealing honestly, and famously, loving your neighbor as yourself. Holiness was about your relationship with God and your relationships with people. And all of it, leads to this final, incredible point. This is how this ancient blueprint connects directly to you and me, right here, right now. See, if you trace this idea of God's sacred space through the whole story of the Bible, you notice something amazing. The spot where God's special presence dwells, it doesn't stay in one place. It's on a journey. It starts in the Garden of Eden, right? The original place where heaven and earth overlapped. Then it becomes a mobile temple, the tabernacle in the wilderness. And then Jesus shows up. God's holy presence literally walking around in a human body. A walking, talking temple. But the journey doesn't even stop there. The final destination of God's sacred space? It's you. It's the person who follows Jesus. We become the living temples where God's Spirit comes to live. And that changes everything, you see? The principles of Leviticus, the idea of carefully and intentionally ordering a space to welcome God's presence, they haven't gone away. They've just been internalized. The question is no longer just, how do we set up this tent? The question is now, how do we order our thoughts, our habits, our relationships, the whole sacred space of our lives? So we end with this. The book of Leviticus gave Israel a blueprint for organizing a physical tent for God to live in. And the question it leaves us with is deeply personal. If our lives are now the living temples, the place where God dwells, how are we organizing that space for His presence today? Now that is something worth thinking about.